In all of bass fishing, there are not many things that are more fun than a topwater frog bite.
Got him. Yes, sir.
And as easy as it would be to just tie a topwater frog on your favorite go-to rod and reel combo you use for everything else, if it is not set up correctly to throw a topwater frog where it's intended to be thrown, you may find yourself incredibly frustrated not being able to hook up on the fish that are biting your topwater frog. Matter of fact, that's maybe why you're watching today's video. So in this video, I want to walk you through what I think is the #1 mistake most beginner anglers make when fishing a frog and how to correct it today so you can become a better frog fisherman and of course, catch more bass. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all.
I can't believe what I just caught.
Yes! Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Tyler's Reel Fishing. My goal here on this channel is to help you guys catch more bass and become better anglers. Today, we're talking about topwater frogs. Now, this video is brought to you by the links in the video description. I work with Tackle Warehouse. They're an awesome online retailer, and the links down there for all the tackle I always use, whether it's frogs, chatterbaits, jigs, whatever, is going to be linked down there for you guys to check out. And if you choose to use Tackle Warehouse for your rod, reel, and tackle shopping, I would really appreciate if you would click those links. It would help continue to keep this being my job. Now, let's move on to talking about the #1 mistake I think most beginner anglers make with a frog, and that is not having the right combination. Now, you may not want to hear this, but unlike other lures like jigs, crankbaits, and other topwaters that can be pretty adequately fished on a variety of rod and reel combos. Matter of fact, I can probably throw a Texas rig on 90% of the rods in my boat. A topwater frog, at least where it's intended to be thrown, should not. I would highly recommend against throwing it on your standard resin line, your monofilament, your fluorocarbon rod and reel combos, because that's not the best thing that's suited for that style of fishing. And what I mean by that is a frog is meant to be thrown in heavy cover. Let me explain. When I mention the word topwater frog, the first thing that probably pops into your head is, where do frogs live? Well, stereotypically, they live right there, in some lily pads, in some grasses, in some cattails. And matter of fact, that's a great place, a good starter place to throw and catch fish on a topwater frog. But the problem is throwing standard rod and reel combos around this type of stuff, this heavy cover, is not going to lend to much success. And I'm going to explain several reasons for why that is. The first and most obvious thing is that you have stuff in the water that's going to get in the way of that fish, and whether you're on the bank, the kayak, the bass boat, or anywhere in between, to get that fish to you. There's going to be some resistance, whether it's pad stems, whether it's hydrilla, milfoil, underwater grasses forming clumps, that fish can get its way into and make it harder for you to fight and land that bass. That's what I call heavy cover. Now, is heavy cover just aquatic vegetation? It's not. You've got underneath boat docks, lay down trees and sticks up against the bank, even man-made structures such as floating tractor tires. There are tons of different things that qualify, in my mind, as heavy cover. And heavy cover, I'm just telling you, after 20 years of bass fishing experience, necessitates a braided line setup. Now, can you put a topwater frog on your standard rod and reel combo and fish it around this kind of heavy cover stuff, maybe adjacent to or on the side of? Absolutely you can. I'm going to explain why a frog can work on fluorocarbon and monofilament here in a second. But if you're not throwing a topwater frog in the thickest, nastiest stuff possible, where you think, I definitely can't get a bass out of that area, I promise you are missing out on some of the coolest fish catches of your life. At the end of the video here, I'm going to show you some of my favorites that are only possible because I was fishing with a stronger, I'm going to call it, rod and reel combo. That is the line, the reel, and the rod itself. Now, when I say stronger rod and reel combo, I'm talking about a rod that the power is at least medium heavy, if not a heavy power rod. The length, I'm gonna say you can do a 7-foot. A 7-foot heavy can work. But for the most part, where a frog should be thrown and where it can be thrown and get bass out of is this super nasty heavy cover stuff you see behind me and you've seen in tons of my videos. And I use a 7.3 at a minimum with a bait casting reel of a relatively fast gear ratio that is anything in the 7s and above. I believe this reel here is an 8.3 to 1, really a 7.5, 8.3, even up to a 9 and a 10 is a great frog fishing reel. And as far as the braided line goes, I do not throw less than 50 pound. And I'm sure somebody's gonna argue in the comment section, what are you catching, a 50-pound bass? That's overkill. But it is not about the actual pound test or the knot breaking strength or whatever of the line itself. It is about the vegetation breaking ability that smaller braided lines just don't have, and resin lines, of course, don't have, along with the abrasion resistance. Is 20-pound braid enough to catch a bass around aquatic vegetation? Absolutely. But if you're throwing a frog over the middle of a pads area and it's got some milfoil that's dead and forming what we call cheese on top, it's just a nasty looking area, and a fish comes up and eats this thing and takes it back down, 20-pound braid may not be the right line pound test to actually rip through that aquatic vegetation, and after fish after fish after fish, a thinner braid loses some of its strength because of some nicks in line, or maybe you're throwing around rocks or wood. A heavier braid just gives you a bigger safety net when it comes to actually getting fish successfully out of the heavy cover day after day after day. If you look at the majority of pro anglers' boat decks, and again, I talk about pro anglers a lot because they're the ones that really, truly know what they're doing. They travel the entire country catching bass for a living, and so you look at their boat decks, they are almost all fishing a frog on a stronger bait casting combo with 50 or 65-pound braided line. Now, two things I want to talk about when it comes to the actual rod length and why I go above 7 foot is because of the way a fish oftentimes eats a topwater frog. So imagine it's going across the top of the water and a fish sees it over here, it shoots to get it, and oftentimes the momentum of its body kind of coming out of the water to eat the frog takes it towards you. So instead of immediately setting the hook and having a good strong hook set, sometimes you won't have a strong hook set because the fish is already a foot, 2 foot, 3 foot closer to you. And so when that happens, you need a longer rod to take up more line on your hook set, therefore getting a good hook into the fish's mouth. So that's the one problem, is that fish are aggressive, they are moving, and so you need a longer rod to get line in. The second is that you don't have nearly as good of an angle to set the hook up into their mouths as you do with a lure, let's say a vibrating jig, or let's just kind of grab a regular Arky style jig here. This here is an Outcast Tackle juice jig, and when your jig is sitting on the bottom, your line is pointed up like this, whether it's kind of like this far from the boat, or you're kind of directly underneath the boat or on the bank. Again, all these tips work if you're a bank fisherman as well. And so you have a higher angle to get the hook turned and into the roof of their mouth because the jig is on the bottom, or any other lure in the water column. So a swim bait, a spinner bait, a vibrating jig, all of those give you an easier angle to set the hook. When a fish grabs your topwater, you have currently no angle, hardly any angle at all, and that's why it's recommended to give it a second or two for that fish to swim back down. That way you have a better hook set angle to turn that hook into the roof of their mouth. And again, it helps to have a longer rod to do that. Now, throwing braid is not important because of the hook diameter, because if I was to hold up the diameter of this jig hook right there, it's actually pretty much identical to that of a frog hook. The biggest reason why I recommend braided line and a longer, stouter, stronger rod for frog fishing is because oftentimes they will eat it, and you actually have to get both of those hooks up into their mouths, which again takes a different level of strength and of force that oftentimes beginner anglers don't even have to begin with. And so if you are throwing a frog, again, can work on a resin line, a fluorocarbon monofilament. But if you are not a good hook setter, you don't have a good, strong, stout hook set, you are potentially losing. Matter of fact, not potentially, you will lose fish on that combo. So why not give yourself a safety net, hedge your bets per se, with throwing a braided line in a heavier rod and reel combo that again has no stretch on the line as compared to stretch that happens on resin line. Here on Tyler's Reel Fishing, we are all about doing things the easy way and not the hard way. That way we can catch more bass and have a whole lot less heartache, and there's less heartache with a topwater frog on a stronger combo. So to prove what I'm talking about, I have taken a topwater frog here, this being a Strike King pad perch, and I've tied it onto kind of a standard soft plastic vibrating jig rod to prove that it is really tough to hook and catch fish in the standard heavy cover frog and stuff lily pads. Now, just to prove that a topwater frog should not be thrown on a resin line, I've got it here on a Texas rig rod, a light jig Ocho. The specs are 7.3, medium heavy, moderate fast, which really isn't a bad frog rod, and the reel of course is fantastic, but the line is what the problem is. So I've got a very stereotypical frog looking spot here, lily pads in front of us, and in the next few minutes I'm going to prove by fishing around moderately thick stuff, not even the heaviest of cover I would fish a frog around, that this style of line is not the best. Gosh, it is so tough to rip it through the pads. That's the first problem I'm noticing. I'm a few casts in, and the second my resin line, again my 17-pound fluorocarbon, gets wrapped around a lily pad stem, braided line, I give it a pop, it breaks it, resin line, not so much. So I'm spending part of each cast really trying to free this thing from the grass. I'm not saying this can't happen with braided line, but man, for the most part, I get through cast after cast without getting my line stuck around something. That is not happening with resin. Come on, get through there, thank you. Oh goodness, holy cow, see what I mean? I still got him, but I'm just like, I'm stuck in every reed possible. I think it's a nice one. I saw his body for a second. I'm gonna go in there and get him, but you can tell, I mean, I can't pull him out. Oh my goodness. Where are you, buddy? You still on there? You still on there? I cannot even tell. Oh no. Got off. Man, that was like a 3-pounder. All right, well, example number 1. Why you don't throw it on resin line. I'm stuck on one pad. Look at that. It's one stinking pad. But to keep proving my point, I'm gonna try it again. Come on now. I've got one. I've got it. Get out of there. Get out of there. Okay, well, hey, we caught one, but I mean, that was like the most edge possible. I had to pull it through 2 lily pads. Hey, got a hook. I wouldn't say I proved myself wrong, but wasn't exactly the ideal situation for throwing a frog. Could have caught that on a swim jig or whatever. Let's get back in the junk. Oh goodness, man. I know the hookup ratio is bad on the frogs anyways, but that thing smoked it. Felt the fish, set the hook, could not get the hook in his mouth, and I doubt I can cast back there and get him again. Usually once you sting a fish, they don't come back. Let me tell you folks, I'm getting real sick of a frog on fluorocarbon. Gosh, come on, man. Oh, never mind, I got one. Get out of there, get out of there. Oh my goodness, yes sir. All right, well, honestly, kind of feel like Bryson DeChambeau if he plays with clubs from the 1920s, because I can still get it done. But really, the area we're fishing today, I tried to get in the slop. The fish are just not in that kind of stuff. So like I said, it is possible to get one of these hooks in the fish's mouth, again, because it's the same diameter as a jig. And on the edge, it's really no different than fishing any other lure. But here's a collection of a few of my favorite frog fishing catches that were only made possible because I was throwing big rods on big braided line.
Got him. Oh my gosh. Giant.
And he's hooked well on the frog. Is he hooked well? Yes, he is. And boat flip. Yes! Let's stinking go, baby. Oh my gosh. Gosh, that's a giant. That's an absolute giant. That's an absolute giant. Yes, sir. Woo! Ha ha ha! Let's go, baby. That's a 6.5 or 7 pounder I just winched out of there. I had to make 50 yard. Gosh, I was wrong. Oh, that's the best kind of noise ever. That's the best noise ever. And that fish is on there. Oh my gosh, how am I gonna get him out? Holy cow. I gotta, straight up. Oh, he's there. Oh, that's a nice one. Oh yes. Holy cow. That's a 6 pounder. Holy cow. So I feel like in this video, I gave a few general tips about the topwater frog, but it might not have been as clear in watching back the video in editing as I wanted it to be. So I'm gonna talk about the 3 main things I intended this video to accomplish. Number 1 being almost to encourage you to start throwing your topwater frog in more places it was designed to be able to be thrown. Now, if your pond or lake doesn't have a whole lot of heavy sticks, floating tractor tires, or just really thick aquatic vegetation like lily pads, cattails, and hydrilla and milfoil, if your pond doesn't have that kind of stuff, can you still throw a topwater frog, especially on normal rod and reel combos with 15 to 17, 20 pound resin line? Absolutely, and I hope I made that clear. You don't have to go pick up a brand new rod and reel combo just to throw a topwater frog. But again, the first purpose of this video was to encourage you this thing can be thrown in some of the snaggiest, almost fishless looking spots, and it can pull some giants, as you saw in some of those last catches, out of those locations. So if you want to do that, will your standard 7-foot medium spinning rod work for that? It won't. Resin line like monofilament or fluorocarbon is just not intended to A, rip through aquatic vegetation, or B, take the kind of beating the topwater frog will give it in the locations I'm encouraging y'all to give it a try. And so if you want to get the most out of your topwater frog, I would highly recommend picking up a frog slash big bait and glide bait and kind of overall larger bait style of rod and reel combo, one of my favorites being the 7.3 heavy Mach crush combo in a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio. Now, if you want kind of an all-around medium to big bait rod that can also work for frogs, I talked about that exact same combo, very similar to this one, but just slightly different, up in this video right here. It is clickable up here in the corner. And the rod combo in this video right here is my all-around topwater jig, bigger spinnerbait, vibrating jig rod that I think will help you guys. And if you don't have it in your arsenal, I would highly recommend going to pick it up. And if you want to watch an episode where I use that exact same rod to catch some big pond frog bass, whammy, it'll be up here in this corner. As always, my tackle is linked down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned something. My name's Tyler, it's a pleasure, and we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.